Hey guys, I am back again. Same night as my last video, but even though at the end of that one I said I might do another um, battle report, I decided instead I would do this little video that's been playing on my mind. So I wanted to say a little bit of stuff on just sort of generally like single models and the perception of what they do to the game. Which is a suitably vague way to start, I suppose. Um, so essentially, I see and have been like part of a lot of complaints saying essentially single models are too powerful and too mobile. The too mobile being the more significant one, I think, because like power level sort of shifts with points pretty much, but the mobility um, is a problem a lot of people have because a lot of people are looking and going, all right, I've got my block of infantry and my infantry costs 400 points. You've got a monster and the monster costs 400 points. And your monster can dance around me all day. Your monster can corner clip. There's all this stuff happening that means that your monster can beat my infantry, basically. Um, and I think a general sort of solution to these problems that a lot of people consider and that I have thought previously would work pretty well is basically if you just go like single models move like regular models. So they have to wheel, they have to do all that sort of stuff. They can't just pivot on the spot and move whatever direction and be hypermobile the way that they are. And I was playing a game a couple of weeks ago against Pascal Smith F, and sort of he mentioned that he has like talked to like newer players getting back into the hobby and was saying they notice that there's like it's more single model heavy and like in lists and stuff, like people are taking more single models now than they used to. When I say getting back into the hobby, I think that he was referring to people who played like Warhammer. So have not played for quite a while, and Ninth is very much its own thing at this stage. You know, the way the game works, I don't have much experience in Warhammer. I was only there for like a year and a half before they killed it, so I could be getting some of the details here wrong, but my understanding is basically that Ninth has basically progressed to really be its own game and have its own basically have its own style where like at the moment for one like single models are quite prevalent in general, although I think that's a little bit overdone by some people, like they're not quite as spammed as I see a lot of people suggesting, I don't think. But one of the things I suggested in this game, I was like, yeah, I think like it would actually just be better if the single models moved normally, as other units did. And he noted, we didn't really have a long discussion, but he was like, yeah, it would probably make the game a bit more static. I don't know if static was his term. I may be losing a little bit because it's been a couple of weeks. But the way I remember it is like, yeah, basically static. And I've thought about that more, mainly because of my recent event where I took Warriors. So I should have 2 of the battle reports up and a third one coming. Because I took 3 sizable blocks of Chosen, 1 reasonable block of Warriors. Oh, where'd that go? Oh, I just dropped something. Ignore that. And what I found was basically, so I didn't really have, 1, I didn't have any single models. 2, I didn't really have many fast things. It would have been a little bit different if I'd taken more knights or maybe Feldrax or something like something that's projects a larger threat range, but sort of typically has less wounds. And what I noticed about my games was that they weren't I didn't have much agency. So my third game against Sylvans is coming, and I haven't reported on it yet, but across all of my games, The first one against Verminstorm, for instance, I sort of just sat there and went, all right, we're going to fight combat. Okay, I'm going to lose. I didn't have, someone who was a better player than me, if I had more experience with the list, like, addendum, like, things that, like, asterisks around me saying this, but I didn't have many options about how I was going to play that game. It was, I'm going to line up, I'm going to fight in combat, I'm going to hope to win in combat. I'm not going to really be able to outmaneuver you. In that game, I couldn't do that, and I lost. In my other two games, I was sort of just in a position where I was like, what I need to do with my list is I need to be in a position where I can win the objective. Because I've got a lot of wounds, I've got high defense, you're probably not going to be taking that much off at range. I've got decent... I thought I had decent range magic damage. I think I overestimated that in retrospect. But at least in my approaches and my thinking, I thought I had decent range magic, so I could I wasn't going to necessarily lose a range battle against a like gun line or bow line or heavy ranged opponent, basically. And it sort of was just this situation where I'm going to touch on my third game, even though no one will have seen it. But basically, particularly in that one, because that was hold the center, and I got first turn. So I went, okay, I'm going to move up, and I'm going to control the center. I'm zoning it, but I can't push. I can't push because if I push, I will be countercharged by a whole bunch of things that are faster than me. If I was able to play a little bit more MSU, I might be able to do that a little bit more. So if Chosen weren't 0 to 4, this is one. Like, these are restrictions that I gave myself. Like, I like Chosen, so I wanted to use Chosen. If they weren't 0 to 4, I might have had units of 5 rather than units of 10. But they're 0 to 4, so I went with more Chosen in fewer units. But essentially how these games played, and this could be a little bit of, just how it all panned out with the specific matchups, but I'm suspecting it's not. I'm suspecting it's sort of a trend and the concept behind them. But a list like that, theoretically I should have more range damage. I think my range damage was a bit poor. Maybe if my alchemy guy was an occultism master with Valwalker, that might be better because it gives me better range. But anyway, the sort of idea there is going, I'm not going to let you beat me at ranged. I don't necessarily need to win. I don't need to beat you with my range damage, but you can't just pick all my wounds off and me lose at range if I don't engage you. But I don't really have any way to engage you, because if I push out, if I step out into that no man's land, what most likely is going to happen is you're going to have multiple units, because I'm slow, particularly because I'm a blocky list. You're probably going to be faster than me. You're probably going to get multiple charges on me, and theoretically, unless you're playing poorly and I'm playing well, I haven't engineered a situation where I'm like, oh, I can just push up and you can't beat my unit. There's not many situations where you can just go in 9th, oh, this unit can't be beaten, I'm going to push it up, and there's nothing you can do about it. A lot of the time, if you do that, you're going to get charged by multiple things and you're going to lose. So I was in this situation where I was just sitting there going, I've taken the center, I'm holding my flanks, I can't push towards you. I'll probably win the objective, because you also can't push towards me. Because unless you were like Wild Huntsman spam, where you've got all these advanced 9 things, it's sort of like you're not so much faster that you can just sit off and then all charge me at once. It's sort of like, well, I've sat off, but I've got first turn so I can hold the objective. You can't push everything at me at once, and if you do, I've probably set up counter charges and stuff, which is a little bit harder if I push up with just one unit and get it a little bit isolated, because I'm slow, so my ranges for counter charging are more limited. So there wasn't really much that I did in either of my wins, which was the second game and the third game, that was actually me taking an active hand in it. when I look at my Beast Herd games, a lot of the time I've got these single models, and I'm able to create a lot of pressure. I'm able to go, I'm taking these areas of the board and I'm moving towards you, and I'm bringing the fight to you whether you like it or not. I can do that because I've got all this hypermobility. I can get out of your arc. I can zoom down the board. I can use terrain like impassables to shield me from you maximizing against me. There's a lot of things that I can do with these single models to make the game active, or like myself. With my chosen list, I couldn't really do that. So this is a really, really long roundabout way of basically saying, I think that if you take away the mobility of single models, you don't all of a sudden have people who are playing single models go, oh, well, the single models aren't good, so I'll take blocks now. Because people are going to take blocks and go like, they can't do it. They can't do the same thing. I'm in a standoff, and it's who blinks first. In my game against Sylvan Elves, it's like, well, I got the first turn, so I've got control of the center. If you'd gotten the first turn, you'd probably have control of the center, and I'd have a really time getting you off it. And that doesn't typically make for terrifically interesting games. So the idea that single models are somehow a negative impact on the game because they're so mobile, I don't think that is such a huge problem. I don't think that the solutions that I've seen really solve what the problem is. I just think that single models in general, light troops, anything that has that hypermobility and combat ability usually, all these things are things that are letting you take the battle to your opponent. And a lot of that is about dancing out of line of sight, which isn't so great. But there's not many times in the game where you manufacture and you go like, cool, I'm going to sit inside your line of sight, but I beat you because my unit is better than yours. Like, my monster is better than your unit or your monster. Yeah, it was dumb for you to put that there across from my guy. You made a mistake. Like, it's not typically that easy. And essentially, if I boil it down, you've sort of got a few play styles that most lists roughly fall into. You've got some that are single model spam, and a lot of the time when you've got single model spam, you want to have good ranged output, because if single model spam plays single model spam, it's like, well, we're just going to dance out of each other's line of sight all day. So we probably want an Exalted Herald or something who will sit there and he'll go like, cool, we're going to do that. I'm going to dance out of your line of sight. Then I'm going to hit you with either a Hellfire or Grave Calls. So good luck. You've also got gun lines, which pretty self-explanatory. They're not that mobile. They just sit back and they shoot at you, hope to win at ranged. You've got more block-heavy lists like my Chosen were, and you've got more... so my Chosen is sort of like MMU to almost even pushing in some respects to like a few large unit type thing. Then you've got more of a battle line sort of MSU type idea. And the MSU idea is almost sort of like, I can push at you because that unit is not that valuable. If I lose that unit, I've got all these units to countercharge you. I've put you in a no-win situation. Either you charge me and you get countercharged, or I charge you and I want to do that anyway. So that's all good. But I think all of these styles have ways similar to the single model spam that make a game a negative experience. So if you look at the gun line, you're like, well, a lot of the time that boils down to, I'm moving across at you because you outrange me, and it's just how well your dice are. Or like on the way in, if your dice get hot, you win the game because you killed enough of my stuff before I made it to combat. If you don't, I win. That's a very simplified version, but like that's one of the problems with that. That's no worse than the fact that single models are dancing around, getting out of line of sight, and then concentrating their force in a weak spot in your line. Block heavy is the problems that I explained with my Chosen, where as a player, you lack a lot of agency. As an opponent, you maybe struggle to approach a list like that. So the battle line stuff has a similar problem where it's like, cool, I'm in this situation where you've got MSU, you've moved up, and if I charge you, I lose. So I won't charge you because I'd rather fight you 1-on-1 than 3-on-1. So it's very similar, the end result, to dancing out of line of sight, because the end result is I don't charge you because I lose. So I don't charge you because I can't see you and I reposition and I make sure you don't get my flanks, or I don't charge you because if I charge you I get countercharged. It's just I reposition and I make sure that's not going to happen. If you charge me, I'll win that combat now. And all of these things, all of these problems basically can boil down to this counterplay for all these things. If you play that MSU blocks or MSU in general, you go like, cool, that's the case this turn, that if you charge me, you lose, and I can't charge you, but I'm better than you, and I'm going to outposition you eventually, and then I'm going to pounce on you. Cool. Maybe I'm not better than you. Maybe I'm going to lose, and you're going to pick off my units because I've made a few mistakes, and I don't have right countercharges set up, and then I lose. That's fine. There's counterplay either way. Block heavy, similar kind of counterplay. I mean, one, the counterplay is just being better in combat than the block heavy lists. But one of the things when you're facing some, or larger blocks, I should say heavy blocks rather than block heavy, but whatever. Like against a list like my chosen list, it's almost like, cool, I can't really fight you 1-on-1, but I've got greater mobility, and I'm going to bring that to bear by being patient and then taking my time and getting around you. And yes, the problem of maybe I can't do that still comes into play, but that's what you need to do. That's how you need to approach the game. Gunline is the same. I need to use cover. I need to approach from different angles. I need to mitigate your shooting somehow. Maybe I can't do that, but that's the thing that I need to do. That's the problem I need to solve in this game. And it's the same thing with single models, where you look there and you go cool, I can't let you get into my flanks. I can't let you combo everything. I need to position differently. I need to not give you space. I need to make sure the spaces that I do have to give you, I can countercharge, so you can't dance out of my line of sight. Or alternatively, you need to go cool, you can dance around all you want. I've positioned safely and I have a steady list. I'm going to take these objectives, and you can't push me off them because I've positioned well enough that you can't get 5 single models into me. And then I go cool, any of my, with my chosen for instance, cool, you can charge any one of my blocks, that's fine. You'll win the first round because you charge me on my flank. I'm going to turn around and then I'm going to beat the shit out of you because you're a monster and I'm a block of infantry with a lot of attacks. Which is obviously a little bit different if it's a unit of 15 spearmen. They're probably not beating any monster in the game. But all of the play styles have these things about them that as an opponent you might look and go oh, this is a bit boring to play against, all you're doing is this. But your list has that too. So I've been guilty of this in the past and being well, Highbond specifically, oh, they got this stupid list that just shoots you, get over them, they beat you in combat. But then I've talked with Bobo a lot about making an interesting high off list, and you can't do it. The book sucks. The book is you've got these 3 iconic special infantry units, and it's you can't, they cost 800 points for a full unit. And they're not that good, and they need all this magic support or character support. And it's yeah, no wonder you play Gunline. You can't make a decent list that isn't a Gunline usually. And then if you do, I just need to accept the fact that I'm okay, this is the problem in this game. I understand that if your shooting's hot, I'm going to lose, and there's not that much that I can do sometimes about that. But there's similar problems in every game that I face, so I shouldn't be blaming Gunline specifically and having a big old rant about that. So, I guess my overall point basically is that this whole idea that 9th is too single model heavy, I think is more a symptom of the fact that people like to be active and engage in games. So, one, if you take a gun line, everyone's going to complain at you all day because no one likes playing gun lines, right? It's if you take dwarves and they're oh, you've taken dwarves, I'm automatically unhappy. And it's well, get over it, princess. So, a lot of people take single models because they go, once I take, if I take an aggressive single model army, I'm in control of the pace of the game, I need to outmaneuver my opponent to win, and this allows me to go for big wins. So those 3 things are all the appeals, basically, where you go, I don't want to play for a 13-7, I want to play for a 20-0, so I'm taking a lot of single models. I want to be able to outplay my opponent, So I need to have a list that has mobility to let me do that, because the movement phase is the most important thing. And that's, I think, one of the reasons why we see this idea that ninth is so single model heavy. It's because a lot of our exposure when you're looking, I mean, if you're a person like me who's very online with ninth, I'm not online in many other areas of life, but with ninth I'm plugged in, right? It's like I see successful lists, I see strong players. Those are the ones that pop up because those are the ones that people are emulating. Those are the people who I specifically follow and see how they're doing, basically. So most of those players are going, well, I'm really good and I want to outplay my opponent. And usually the best way to do that is by taking a lot of single models, because outplaying my opponent happens in the movement phase, where if I take a gun line, there's less that I can do. And I mean, there are exceptions to everything, and like the High One Elf list that was going around is a good example of one that... well, it was less, I think, it was less about big wins, but you could typically get big wins because you could pounce on opponents' mistakes and stuff. But it was almost like I've got a really solid game plan to get a decent win, and you need to come and stop me from doing that. And in coming to stop me doing that, I'm going to play better than you, and then I'm going to punish your mistakes, and that's how I'm going to get my big wins. But it does rely on your opponent going, I'm going to play you. Whereas, sometimes if we were in a teams tournament, and my weakest player in my team, I paired him into Bobo, I wouldn't say, you go beat... I mean, I probably would say, you go beat that guy, go have fun, because that's what the game is about. But if I was trying to tactically win, I wouldn't be like, yeah, go in and play him. I'd just be like, look, here's how you deploy, don't move, make him get as many points as he can. If you get anything other than 0, you've done well in this matchup. So, I've kind of lost where my point was going here. Probably something about high elves. But... I think that the meta is probably less single model heavy than perception might indicate. And I think that's just a reason why people take single models, which is basically because it lets them be more active in the game. And if you look at, so as 2 recent examples, I was thinking about this before. So Dread Elves was one of them. And then what are the other new books? KOE? Nope. Vermin Swarm? Nope. I don't know. Let's focus on Dread Elves, because I can't remember what I was thinking about otherwise. So, Dread Elves is sort of like almost... I don't know if it was actually a mandate, but like one part of their book seemed to be like, we're going to make these combat infantry blocks work. We're going to make executioners or judicators, obsidian guard, I think those are the terms now. We're going to make them work, right? One of the ways that they made them work was by going, cool, we're elves. We're advanced 5. That's fast for infantry. Cool. Good. You've got academy trained? Cool. You're going to get +1 if you're within anything else with academy trained. You're now movement 6. Cool. You can give a unit scent of blood. So now if anything has taken a wound and we've got shooting that can ping off some wounds and stuff, you'll be at about 6 it'll be at about 7 if you're charging it. Maybe you've got a BSB in there. Maybe you've given him the banner of speed. You're now advanced 8. There's just a lot of ways that to make the infantry work. All they really did was go, we're making them faster. We're giving them a longer threat range. Which I don't think solves a problem. It's similar to Warriors was my other example. There we go. Similar to Warriors, where people are like, no, I don't want to play Helmor. I want to play Warriors. I don't want to teleport. I want to march up and win in combat. And it's like, well, it doesn't really work that way. If you want to play blocks, you need to accept that you're not playing a super dynamic style where you rush across the board and you get 20s. Your opponent doesn't want to fight you if they're going to lose. So they're going to do what they can if it's a losing combat to avoid that. The Helmor lets you turn your slow infantry into far more... get them into far more dynamic positions, and lets you, if you use it well, take advantage to go cool, I've used this well, I've now positioned my units well, and similar to if I had these single models with their hypermobility, I've put you in a very difficult situation where I've got multiple charge threats and I'm going to roll you over, basically. So, people don't want to do that. They want to play blocks and they don't want to teleport them. And it's like, well, you can't have it both ways. Because all a lot of people are really wanting is to play blocks and not change anything about their style, but all that means is basically going, cool, well, maybe my block should move like single models. Maybe they should all be at least March 14. Like, there's sort of like the two band-aids to the situation of people wanting to play aggressively and get big wins with blocks are turning infantry effectively into cavalry in the Dread Elf book, or teleporting them around in the Warriors book. The Demons book, I don't think you see that many like heavy infantry based lists. I don't think. I think most people drawn to that army are drawn to more the single models and stuff anyway. But they some sort of solved it by going like, we'll just make everything Swift Stride. So now our blocks are faster again. It's like, it's all like a band-aid on top of the fact that the style of if you take big blocks, you are playing a fairly static game for the objective. You need to have solid macro play, and you need to accept that if opponent doesn't impale himself on you, you win a small win because you take the objective. If you don't want to play like that, unfortunately, you probably don't want to play large blocks. If you want to play super aggressive, you basically need to go MSU or single models. Those are really, in my opinion, are your only options. And if you want to say we're going to take away the mobility of single models, all you do is take away one of those ways. And now all of a sudden, if you want to play aggressive, you've got to play MSU. And maybe that's basically just as bad, in my opinion, because if you take away the mobility of the monsters, maybe you make them a lot cheaper, but then you've still got a lot of the same other problems that people complain about, where like, you can just corner clip, and then now that you've corner clipped, you're still getting all of your attacks, whereas I only get one of my guys. And I don't think the solutions to the problem of single models is anywhere near as simple as people think. And I think the game-wide ramifications of trying to solve that problem are far more complicated than we are willing to admit. Personally, I've moved now to the stage where I think, you know what, I don't reckon it's that big a problem. I reckon everybody just... I'm trying to complain less about what people take and my experience against it, because I think that everything, as I said at the start, has its own negatives. But everybody take what they want to take. We know how the game works. We know the game rules. If we've thought about it a little bit, what you take, we know what kind of game it will be. Just make sure that you're happy with that kind of game. If you want to play a gun line and you don't want to have that intense movement phases, and you want to be a bit dice reliant in terms of making your shooting, hoping that it kills the things before it gets to you because you don't have as many combat threats. If that's what you want to do and that's how you have your fun, great. Enjoy that. If you want to play single models and you want to be aggressive and pressure your opponent from multiple angles and pick apart weak spots in their line and force concentrate through there, fantastic. But whatever you do, you just need to accept that other people will have fun in a different way. So if you don't like the way single models play, I maybe don't like the way your gun line plays. So every list I come up against, I could find I don't really like the way that it just does this. You can sum up almost every list in one sentence, all it does is it does this and then it wins the game. It doesn't really help anything. You can reduce every list, every army in that way, and I think we all just need to be a little bit more open with going you know what? The game's fun. There are problems that are almost unavoidable in a game this complicated. It's fine. Have fun with great people, and just accept the fact that not every style of game is going to be exactly what you want, really. So, yeah, that's really all I was thinking about. But moral of the story is, I think single models are getting a bad rap at the moment, and I don't think they deserve it. I'm having a lot of fun with my single models, and I hope other people are having a lot of fun with whatever style they choose to play. So, that's it. Thanks, guys.